Rawa's the host of our meeting tonight. So yeah, over to you, Rawa. Get us underway.
Okay, kia ora and assalamu alaikum to everyone. Thank you so much for being here. It means a lot to Palestinians and everyone in general. First of all, I would like to introduce Helda Halkiard Harawira to give a mihi, please.
Hi, Hilda.
You need to unmute, Hilda.
Mute.
Ai tēnā tātou, e mihi ana kia tātou katoa e hui ana I te pō nei. Nō reira, me timata hau me tētahi karakia hei haka kotahi a tātou. I te kai hango ngā mea katoa te aki pai tēnei rōpū whānui puta no I Aotearoa I te ao whānui, e hui ana I tēnei pō ki te korowai, he te tautoko mō te whānau, ngā whānau o Palestine I tēnei wā, kua pāhu muru whenua e te iwi o Iharaira I tēnei wā. Nō reira, mea nākitea tēnei rōpū kia whai kaha whai rongoa hei tautoko nā iwi takitaki, te iwi mana whenua o Palestine I tēnei huihuinga. Kia ora tātou, everybody on this call tonight. Ngā mihi kia koutou I whakahaere tēnei kaupapa. I especially want to thank those who are keeping Palestine, support for Palestine to the forefront of our mind. In Aotearoa, sometimes we get a bit consumed about our own issues in our own whenua, which is fair enough. Mm-hmm. And I think about the community that we're talking about tonight, and I was really, I don't mean to be happy, but I was grateful that at least it was on TV1 News tonight, because it's been such an invisible piece of, media. So I was appreciative that the New Zealand TV1 had that and was highlighting and showed the bombing of the area, which they're saying is a military target practice, but hello, there's a whole lot of high-rise buildings, and a child was killed there today. Nō reira, I especially want to thank the John, also Roger. These are two Pākehās I have a lot of trust in. They have supported the unfavourite kind of issues that people don't think are very popular most of the time, and I promise you they will slog and keep that the issue of Palestine. Now, why I relate to this take is already, I think that when you talk about the community Masafer Yatta, it makes me think of 10 or 12 little Māori communities as we still live today, and how terrible. I mean, it's what people face today. They're silly in comparison to an attack by war, but we suffer these little attacks every day by legislation, and they continue to remove what little we have left, and we continue to be fighting the same fight that we thought we finished yesterday. But so I think of 10 little Māori communities around here, and would not like to see that kind of brutal attack on us. Ka waiho tira kōrero, just happy to be part of this tonight. Mihi kia tātou, and I do send a karakia of unity for all of us to put a korowai or a cloak around all those who are trying to bring this take to the fore, to the New Zealand government, to other people, just to the general population of Aotearoa hoki. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, Kia ora tātou katoa.
Kia ora.
Kia ora, thank you so much. First of all, I would like to thank everyone for coming. It does mean a lot for a Palestinian. And actually, we have two amazing Palestinians from overseas who are going to speak with us today, Sami and Manal Shqair. First of all, I would like to introduce Manal to introduce herself and to start off with her speech.
Thanks a lot, Rawa. Hi, everyone. My name is Manal. I'm a grassroots organizer based in the West Bank. I'm also the International Advocacy Officer of Stop the Wall campaign, which is a grassroots organization established in 2002 when Israel started the construction of its apartheid wall in order to organize popular actions. And now we're working against Israeli apartheid wall and the associated apartheid regime, including settlement expansion, particularly in the West Bank. I'd like to start by thanking you for organizing this rally. I think it's really an important act of solidarity, especially in these difficult moments, while Gaza is under attack. And it's really heartbreaking to see that Gaza is under another Israeli brutal assault. So far, since yesterday, 16 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli rockets, and more than 70 people they got injured. Those who were killed, they were murdered, as we are still in mourning for the loss of Amjad Abu Alia, the 15-year-old boy who was murdered by both Israeli settlers and soldiers during a peaceful protest in Al-Mughayr village in the district of Ramallah on the 29th of July. And also we're still mourning the murder of Dirar Kafrini. He's 18 years old. He was killed by Israeli soldiers during a brutal raid into the main refugee camp on the 1st of August. And those who were killed in the Gaza Strip, among of them is 5-year-old Ala Qaddoum. She was standing in front of her family's home when an Israeli airstrike killed her yesterday. Dunyana Lamour, who is 22 years old, was also amongst those who were murdered yesterday in the Gaza Strip. Dunyana is an art student. She's a human being full of life, full of hope, and full of ambitions. In one of her social media posts, she once said that, do you know that we're all occupied except Palestine? They try to occupy it. And she also said, once said, commenting on her artwork, that for my part, I do nothing surprising. I just try to make life bearable in the midst of this solitude. Referring to the inhuman blockade imposed on the Gaza Strip for more than 15 years. Also, among those who were killed were leaders in the Islamic Jihad, an armed resistance group based in the Gaza Strip and also in the West Bank. So what's happening in the Gaza Strip is not disconnected from what's been happening in the West Bank recently, particularly in the last week, because Israel has intensified the assassination and arrest of key Palestinian leaders and the freedom fighters. Particularly, this is something we've seen in what happened in Nablus, where 2 freedom fighters were assassinated, and also days after Israel invaded Jenin refugee camp and arrested Bassam Saadi, who was also a well-known figure in the Islamic Jihad, and killed Dirar Kafrini in that military operation, and increased Israeli violence against all forms of Palestinian resistance, including armed and peaceful resistance. It coincides with intensified settlement expansion in Masafer Yatta, in the Jordan Valley, even in Natab, which is now part of present-day Israel. So what Israel is trying to do, what Israel has been trying to do since the start of the year, where so far 80 Palestinians in the West Bank have been murdered, is to quell Palestinian resistance in order to make way for its settlement expansion, its land grab, and to also squeeze us into ever smaller enclaves. What we Palestinians are doing through our resistance is to reject being squeezed in these Bantustans, being dehumanized. It's about, like, it's a fight in order to protect our land and our existence on our land, and we're not giving up. And that's something we showed last year during the Unity Intifada, when we all came together, Palestinians who are treated as third-class citizens of Israel, Palestinians in Gaza, in the West Bank, in Jerusalem. We all came together in what we call the Unity Intifada to protest decades of oppression and decades of settler colonialism and apartheid. And this year we also do the same. We emphasize that we're not giving up our land. We're not accepting to live in Bantustans. We want to dismantle this vicious apartheid regime. And that is a human instinct. Resistance is our way to embrace our humanity. And that's what we're doing. That's what we've never stopped doing, and we will never stop doing. We will keep resisting because we want to, like, embrace, as I said, our humanity, and also especially because Israel is dehumanizing us. This whole regime of oppression is about dehumanizing Palestinians, treating us as subhumans or less than humans. And but this fight, we can't be in this fight alone. We need the solidarity of people around the world, especially because our struggle against Israel's three-tier system of oppression, settler colonialism, apartheid, and military occupation is connected to other struggles around the world. It's connected to the Maori struggle in New Zealand, to Indigenous people's struggle in Turtle Island, to Black people's struggle and other peoples, oppressed peoples around the world by imperialist powers. And we believe, like, we strongly believe, despite of the difficult situation we live in, we strongly believe that another world is possible. And Indian writer Aotearoa Roy reminds us that it's possible. It's not something impossible. She even says, another world is not only possible, it's on her own way. On a quiet day, I can hear her breathing. I also can hear this other word breathing every day, not just on a quiet day, even when the sound of Israeli rockets are loud, the sound of Israeli guns are loud. I can hear this word breathing because I'm inspired by our smooth, I'm inspired by our resistance and the fact that we're not giving up our human rights. I'm also hopeful because of the solidarity we receive from you and from others around the world, but we want this solidarity to increase, especially by pressuring your government to answer Palestinian calls to investigate Israel, on the UN to investigate Israeli apartheid. It's one way through which we can hold Israel accountable for its decades-old crimes against us, in order for the UN to reactivate the Apartheid Convention and mechanisms to impose targeted sanctions on apartheid Israel, including a military embargo. I'm gonna stop here because I'd like to share with you a video about Masafer Yatta, which, I mean, the situation in Masafer Yatta is just a microcosm of the situation in Palestine everywhere. But Masafer Yatta is the place where you see how vicious Israeli settler colonialism and apartheid is. I'll share my screen with you.
Crime waiting to happen. Israel wants to keep these
Is that working?
Yes.
out of their homes and hand their land over to the military.
Israel says that you are here illegally and you don't have the right to be here. What do you say to that?
وهي الدولة العنصرية الفاشية اللي بتستهدفنا، احنا بتستهدف أرضنا، بتستهدف هويتنا على هاي الأرض.
Hundreds of homes are under imminent threat of demolition.
احنا معرضين للخطر. احنا في اي لحظه انهم يجوا ينسفوا بيوتنا. وين نروح؟
While the residents await their fate, they're facing increased attacks from Israeli settlers and the military.
هذا المستوطن هو محتل، هو سراق، هو يعني كمان هو مجرم إرهابي.
معاي الفيديو، معاي كل شيء على الجندي كيف طخوا وكيف سوى، ولا ابني حامل سلاح ولا متعرض، اجى هيك يعني فجأة انا بحط له اياها على السفر.
الجيش راح يجيب المستوطنين راح تسكن محل الناس الأصليين. هاي اللي بيصير في كل فلسطين هاي اللي بتتبعه إسرائيل، سياسة التطهير العرقي، محو تاريخ الفلسطيني على هاي الأرض وتهويدها.
People behind us were just saying that we're peaceful activists, we're coming here peacefully, but yet the Israeli soldiers have continued to push them back. You can see one of the activists behind me is just holding a poster that says "Save Masafer Yatta, End Israeli Apartheid." But Israeli soldiers, as you can see, have continued to aggressively push the peaceful protesters back.
This is what a typical Friday looks like in the South Hebron Hills of the occupied West Bank. Palestinians in the area have been ramping up their demonstrations in recent months, following a decision by the Israeli Supreme Court to expel them from their homes and turn the area into an Israeli military firing zone.
ليش ياخذ ارضنا؟ قل لي ليش؟ اعطيني سبب واحد ليش ياخذ هذه الارض؟ هاي الارض احنا رويناها بدمنا، رويناها بعرقنا.
احنا لا معنا حجار ولا معنا سلاح ولا معنا عصا، احنا معنا علم.
So one of the activists who was here was just taken into custody. You can see him over there. He was waving his flag and chanting towards the soldiers. We heard right now behind us that one of the soldiers has told the activists, "This is a closed military zone and you are not allowed to be here."
نقتل ناس محاربين عشان يعيشوا احرار، بدناش نقتل حدا احنا بدنا نعيش احرار بدون احتلال، وحنيتها الكل بكون في لها محلها، الكل.
The South Hebron Hills, known locally as Masafer Yatta, is a vast mountainous area on the southern tip of the West Bank, bordering the Green Line, the demarcation line that separates Israel from the occupied Palestinian territory. It consists of a series of villages and hamlets and is home to an estimated 2,500 people. For 2 decades, the residents here have been tied up in a legal battle with the Israeli military, who declared the land as a firing zone and is seeking to rid it of all its Palestinian inhabitants. In May 2022, the Israeli Supreme Court ruled against the residents of Masafer Yatta, paving the way for the forcible displacement of more than 1,300 Palestinians and the demolition of 8 villages. It's a move that rights groups say would amount to forcible transfer, a war crime under international law. If carried out, the plan to remove the residents of Masafer Yatta would constitute the largest mass expulsion of Palestinians in decades. Sami Horeini is from Masafer Yatta and is one of the founders of Youth of Sumud, a collective of young activists fighting against Israel's plans to expel them from their homes.
اللي بصير إنه الناس راح تفقد بيوتها، الناس راح تتشرد، وهذا جريمة لا يمكن إنها تحصل أو يمكن السكوت عليها.
What do you have to say about the fact that Israel's Supreme Court, supposed highest authority of justice, has ruled to forcibly expel more than 1,000 Palestinians from their homes?
ما هي محاكم مجرد هي ظالمة وهي عنصرية فقط لجانب إسرائيل. أول حاجة 22 سنة من المحاكم من سنة 2000 لليوم، والقرار نفسه يطلع، كمان هذا أكبر ظلم. الناس قدمت كل الإثباتات التاريخية يعني لملكية هاي الأرض. منطقة المسافر يطلع مناطق ملكية خاصة. هاي كل اللي أتى الاحتلال ضربها بعرض الحائط. القاضي تبع هاي المحكمة هو مستوطن، بالتالي كل القرارات العنصرية هي موجودة، ما فيش شيء اسمه عدل، ما فيش شيء علاقة بأي موضوع العدل.
Sami is from Aotearoa, one of 19 villages in Masafer Yatta. The entirety of Masafer Yatta falls under Area C of the West Bank. Everything in Area C, from building plans, roads, water, and electricity, are all under Israeli control. Residents here are subjected to frequent night raids into their villages and homes, military detention, attacks from soldiers and settlers, and home demolitions. Israeli authorities rarely ever grant building permits to Palestinians in Area C, forcing many people to build without them, putting their homes at risk of demolition. Even in the few areas that are zoned for Palestinian construction, the Israeli military still enforces demolitions under the pretext of lacking Israeli-issued permits.
استخدام هاي الحجج مشان انهم هم يظلوا محسسينك بس بالخوف وبالخطر. اذا مستوطن بده يسوي اي شيء وبحاجه لاي نوع من هاي التصاريح يعني لا يستغرق اكثر من 24 ساعه.
Residents like Sami say these coercive policies and practices are done with the end goal of making life here impossible for the Palestinians.
حياة الفلسطيني في هاي المنطقة صعبة بكل معنى الكلمة من كل مضايقات وسياسات الاحتلال اليومية على الناس اللي بتهدف لطرد الناس من هاي المنطقة وتهجيرها. وجود الناس هو أكبر مقاومة. إحنا كيف نحافظ على هذا الوجود؟ دورنا كنشطاء استمرارية دعم صمود الناس وندعم بعضنا حتى نستمر في هاي المنطقة ونقاوم كل مخططات الاحتلال التهجيرية.
The problems for the people of Masafer Yatta began in the early 1980s when Israel declared 3,000 hectares in the area as a closed military zone. They dubbed it Firing Zone 918. But there was one major problem. There were 12 inhabited Palestinian villages within the boundaries of the newly declared firing zone, and the residents had been living there for generations. So the Israeli military ordered the residents to leave, saying they were living illegally in a firing zone. The residents fought back by petitioning to the Israeli Supreme Court. The court issued an interim injunction that allowed the villagers to remain on the land, but it forbade any new construction, effectively throwing the residents into limbo, unable to grow their communities for more than 20 years. Israel offered to move the villagers to a different, far smaller area south of the town of Yatta, but the villagers refused, and the court proceedings dragged on. While the families waited for the court to decide their fate, the Israeli military continued to enforce home demolitions and conduct live training in the area, using everything from tanks, helicopters, bombs, rockets, and live fire. The Supreme Court decision in May gave the army the green light to completely demolish 8 of the 12 villages in the firing zone and destroy hundreds of other structures within its borders. The plan will result in the forcible transfer of 1,300 Palestinians, including more than 500 children.
بيحاولوا يكونوا مقنعين للعالم بيستخدموا موضوع انه هي منطقة اطلاق نار لتدريب جيش الاحتلال. الاحتلال بيجي على منطقة وين ما الناس ساكنة بيعلن هاي المنطقة منطقة اطلاق نار لتدريب الجيش. هذا حجة تدريب الجيش هاي مشان يهجر الناس لا اكثر ولا اقل. مسافر يطا هي منطقة سي وكمان بالاضافة انها منطقة اطلاق نار، يعني الحياة صعبة مرتين.
So right now we're standing in what the Israeli military has designated as Firing Zone 918. Now the Israeli military says that the Palestinians who live here, who have been living here for decades, have no right to be here. The Israeli military actually has the power to come in and raze this entire village to the ground at any moment. Every single one of the structures that you see around me has a demolition order on it. And if the military comes in and razes this village to the ground, the Palestinians who live here are going to be left homeless with nowhere to go. Majda Abu Sabha is one of the residents of the village. In the past year, the Israeli military has destroyed her home 3 times, with the latest demolition taking place just a few weeks ago.
مفاجأة. إحنا كنا يعني مشغولين في شغلنا. وجيها الجرافات، لندات، جيش، إيش لا يوصف. قام هدم بقوة. لا خلونا نقدم نطلع العفش، لا خلونا نقدم نطلع الأثاث من البيوت. وطب في أطفال، في حلال، في إيش يعني. أصبحوا تحت العراء.
كيف تكون شعورك يوم تطلعي قدامك وتشوفي آثار بيتك يعني مهدومة؟
طبعا الواحد يصيبه صدمة. مش جايين فيهم، احنا بعيدين عنهم، بلادنا يعني هاي، وين نروح يعني؟ احنا ما لنا مأوى خلاف المأوى هذا. لا خلونا خيمة، لا خلونا دار، ولا خلونا حتى الخيام اجوا هدوهن. احنا معرضين للخطر. احنا في اي لحظة انهم يجوا ينسفوا بيوتنا. وين نروح؟ نقدر نعيش في الحر وفي البرد الكارثة في هذه البلاد هاي.
Just under 900 structures are under imminent threat of demolition in the firing zone. Those structures include homes, livestock pens, latrines, water cisterns, mosques, and schools. A few meters from the rubble of Majda's home is a local school that Israel has slated for demolition. This is one of 4 schools in Masafer Yatta that has an Israeli demolition order on it. The Israeli army can come in at any time and destroy this school. Now, this particular school services around 70 to 80 children from primary school up until high school. The residents here say that if the school is destroyed, it's going to severely impact the education and literacy that they've been working so hard to improve for years. While the Palestinians in Masafer Yatta live under constant threat of expulsion, there are hundreds of Israeli settlers in the area who live very different lives.
هو بيتمتع بكل ما يحتاجه من ماء، كهرباء إلى آخره، خدمات لا محدودة، وكأنه عايش في عن جد في مش في منطقة محتلة، وكأنه عايش في دولة أوروبية. في نفس المنطقة قوانين 2 على كل حدا، يعني كل حدا له قانون خاص، تمام؟ وهو جزء الأبارتايد، واللي بأكد موضوع الأبارتايد اللي إسرائيل بترتكب هاي جريمة الأبارتايد ضدنا بشكل يومي.
There are 10 Israeli settlements and outposts in Masafer Yatta, dotted along the border of the firing zone. Under international law, these Jewish-only settlements are illegal. Yet, over the years, the Israeli government has continued to promote settlement expansion in the West Bank at a rapid rate. The Israeli settlers in Masafer Yatta frequently attack Palestinians, their homes, and their livestock. Residents say the attacks happen on a daily basis and often take place under the supervision of Israeli military and police. Israeli settlers are rarely ever charged or investigated for attacks committed against Palestinians.
هذا المستوطن هو محتل، هو سراق، هو يعني كمان هو مجرم إرهابي بيرتكب كثير من يعني الاعتداءات والإجرام ضدنا كشعب فلسطين. فوجود هذا المستوطن هو بيمثل كل معاني القهر، كل معاني الظلم، كل معاني الاستبداد إلنا في هذه المنطقة.
The residents of Masafer Yatta fear that if Israel kicks them off their land, it will eventually be turned over to the settlers. Newly revealed classified documents confirmed what the residents believed to be true for so many years. In a top-secret 1979 meeting, former Israeli Prime Minister, then Agricultural Minister Ariel Sharon, explained that he created firing zones across the West Bank for the sole purpose of eventually handing the land over to Israeli settlers. In the village of Khirbet al-Rakiz, we met a Palestinian family whose lives were turned upside down during an Israeli raid on their village last year. In January 2021, Israeli forces raided the home of Rasmi Abu Arram's neighbor and attempted to confiscate the generator that powered both families' homes. as Israeli soldiers beat him and his neighbor, Rasmi's 24-year-old son, Harun, ran down from their home to his father's aid.
مسك اليهود الجنود وفعسهم عني لما أنا قمت لما وصلني. الحين ابني حطوا حريته في شو اسمه صاروا ياخذوا في العدة بدهم ياخذوها. ابني كل ما ياخذوا يعاودوا يجروا فيهم. الحين لما انحروا اجوا 4 مسكوه بدهم يجروه على الجيب. الحين توصلوا باب الجيب فعسهم وشرد منهم عاود اخذ المتور منهم وعاود سووه لهم بدهم يعتقلوه. الحين لما شافوه هيك واحد مسكه من رقبته وواحد حط له اياها من السفر وطخه.
The screams in the video were from Harun's mother, who pleaded for the soldiers to call an ambulance.
صرت أحكي لهم معكم إسعاف تعالوا سعفوه، طختوه تعالوا سحبوه، صاروا يرجعوا لورا ويطخوا بالهواء ويطخوا تحت جرينا ويرجعوا لورا. الحين في لأشرف سيارة، قلت له يا أشرف جيب السيارة خلينا نسعف هارون. فتح باب السيارة أجا جندي من هناك طخ عجالها ال4 خليهن على محلها.
By the time the family were able to reach a hospital, it had been a few hours and Harun was in critical condition. He remembers the moment he woke up in the hospital as if it was yesterday.
كنت صحيت من المستشفى الأهلي في المستشفى خشت علي أمي صرت أصيح ما بقيت أقدر أحرك إيدي فقعت في حالي في يوم الليلة إني أنا مرمي صرت أصيح وأمي والدكاترة طلعوا أمي عني.
Doctors told Harun's parents that the bullets caused a severe spinal cord injury, paralyzing him from the neck down. He would never move on his own again.
أنا يعني انصدمت ما قدرش أستوعب الموقف الكلام اللي حكوا لي إياه. دمرونا يا أمي دمروا حياتنا. هاي وقاعد بتألم ليل ونهار.
Since Harun was shot, the Israeli military has taken no responsibility for the incident. An army investigation after the shooting concluded that Israeli forces acted in, quote, self-defense, and that they faced a, quote, clear and present risk to their lives. The family were told by lawyers that there was little hope that a lawsuit would yield any results.
معاي الفيديو معاي كل شيء على الجندي كيف طخوا كيف سوى ولا ابني حامل سلاح ولا متعرض اجى هيك يعني فجأة انا بحط له اياها على السفر. يعني هو فيش امل يعني فيها هذا الشيء.
يعني انا ما بدي شيء منهم بس يعطوني حق ابني. يسمحوا لي اني ابني له غرفة اوصل له كهرباء ومي. المحكمة تحكم بحق عادل يعني مش يقولوا إنه جندي بدافع عن نفسه.
Harun is now 25 years old and spends his days lying on the floor of his family's cave. He relies on his parents and sisters to feed him, bathe him, and give him his medicine. Because their home falls in the firing zone, Harun and his family still live every day under the threat of expulsion. With every passing day, the residents of Masafer Yatta say their situation becomes even more dire. Experts warn that if the state is successful, it would set a dangerous precedent for other Palestinian communities under threat of expulsion, and would pave the way for Israel to quietly annex the land into its territory in the future. As we traveled through Masafer Yatta, there was one common theme amongst the Palestinians living there: the concept of sumud, or steadfastness and perseverance on their land. They told us that no matter what happens to them, they have no plans of leaving.
إحنا أصحاب هاي الأرض ومجنع هاي الأرض وتاريخنا فيها وحياتنا ويعني وكمان إن شاء الله مستقبلنا فيها مش هنطلع منها يعني.
أنا قاعد داوش دافع عن أرضي وعرضي وعن أبوي وجاري وليرجع يدي ورجلي بدافع عن أرضي ومش هتخلى عنها.
كل الأعمال العنف اللي بتعملها إسرائيل مشان التهجير، لكن لم نرحل صامدين والمسافر إلنا ما هي إلهم.
إحنا الشعب الفلسطيني ما بنضعف، عندنا إرادة قوية يعني قديش الاحتلال بيعمل فينا مصايب وجرايم وإحنا بنضلنا صامدين.
Back to you, Rawa.
Thank you so much. The video was very, very good. I found it very educational. I agree with everything you said. Palestinians resist, and what other people can do is educate others. Not only Palestinians have to do that alone. And to be honest, I just want to say, Sami and Manal, sorry, you guys are very brave. Being an activist or not just an activist, a speaker, a Palestinian speaker in Palestine is so brave because you guys are the ones who are going through the things amongst the Israeli soldiers. I want to thank you guys so much. As a Palestinian myself living outside, you guys are very brave. Thank you. Next, Sami, if he would like to come to speak with us. Sami, Helene?
Hi everyone. Sorry.
No, thank you.
So I hope I didn't miss a lot. Okay, guys, I'm so happy to be with all of you today. I am Sami. I'm from a village called Twani, Masafer Yatta. I am activist in the non-violent resistance against the occupation, Masafer Yatta. And I would like really to thank you to give us this opportunity to be with you all today and to talk about the recent situation and share some updates and hopefully to get work and do some work together to help and save our area and Masafer Yatta. Especially in this hard time we are going through, like we are really targeting and reaching out to most of the platform that is possible in order to create a pressure in the Israeli government and in the Israeli occupation to prevent the crime of ethnic cleansing from happening in this place. So I'm really again so happy to be connected with you all. And it's maybe the first time for me even to speak with in a Zoom with the New Zealand. As you know, for us, for Palestinians, our struggle and our fight with the occupation is not something recent. It's something really, it's happening from 74 years until now, which we are daily struggling and resisting this occupation. And we are now reaching the point that we are almost in Masafer Yatta losing our homes under big silence around the world around this crime that Israel want to commit publicly, and the international community is responding very quiet and silent in this crime without really serious action to be taken against this war crime. We are talking about even right now the situation over here when we are talking yesterday 6 people from our area were arrested while they were just being in their place and in their land. That's a completely unfair arrest and unexplainable. Okay, without any explains, just now Israel is targeting every Palestinian in this land, in this place, without any charges. you can arrest. That's usually can happen, but now it's happening more and more. We are talking about the night raids, especially to my village. My village in the last 2 nights was raided twice by the Israeli military training. It's like terrorizing our people in the area, to trying to stop our work and our activism. And as well now, we are waiting tomorrow morning at 5 a.m. The settlers will raid my village of Twani with a big protection of Israeli army, under the pretext they want to come and to do prayers inside the village. What's going on, completely now situation is like here is out of control, which is making a huge mess of Israeli army that all of these things just get it more and more crazy after 8th of May, when the Israeli Supreme Court issued the eviction decision for Masafer Yatta. I'm talking about we are here facing in the area of Masafer Yatta 2 policies, as it was explained in the video. Half of the area is firing zone, the other half is targeted by settlement. But most of the the heavily program and the attacks were raised by the army just really mainly by after the court decision. So we are now talking about daily car confiscation. We are talking about, like, in order to not let anyone feel safe in this place. As I said, the night raid, for example, in my village of Twani, but in the other villages, we are talking about the military training, which the military training, we are talking about the live shooting, we are talking about the tanks, we are talking about the helicopter. All of this is directly hurting and affecting the Palestinian who is living here, which means when we talk about the tanks which are destroying the roads, that are destroying the fields of the people here, people also have to know, in my area, simple people based on grazing sheep and farming land. So all this main source of income, the fields are destroyed by the tanks. We are talking about the helicopter chasing the shepherds. We are talking about the live ammunition, the live bullet reaching to come to the houses. This is like putting our life in a real danger, and that we will be killed at any moment. At any moment, and without watching any action, because this can't happen with this, like, we're talking about this war crime, and it's happening without real action from the international community toward us. I don't want to be like really talking so longly. I appreciate all the history of and the struggle of the New Zealand people, and I believe that you are guys can be a very good supporter for us in this case of Masafer Yatta. He had maybe a good background from the Mondowi's video, from what Manal mentioned and said, and I hope you are always staying around and connected and sharing the updates, and hopefully like asking your politician and your country as well to take action, and to push them to take action toward our case, and to stand for justice for Palestinians. And I think I'm gonna stop here, and if you have any comment, any question, any point I didn't went through, please let me know and I will go into it.
Thank you so much. Does anyone want to ask him or say anything? Thank you, Sammy. So now we will have some solidarity messages from Aotearoa itself, from New Zealand. I wanted to introduce Ahmed Sadih, but he will not be able to join us. He's a spokesperson for Palestinians in Aotearoa Coordinating Committee, but instead, kindly Maher Nazal will be speaking on behalf of him.
Yeah. Thank you, Rawa. Thank you for having me. I'm sorry, I'm tested positive COVID case, so I lost my voice, but I'll try to make just a quick solidarity message. I was preparing myself to do some speech about Masafer Yatta, because I am from Palestine, from West Bank, nearly to Hebron, so I know what's going on there. I waked up on the midnight New Zealand time on the Gaza war, or Gaza under attack, or whatever you call it. So it's confusion here what to talk about. The video explained the Masafer Yatta case very well, and maybe to highlight what is the link between Masafer Yatta case and what's happening in Gaza. Both of them, they live in nightmare. Meaning what? We are not surprised of the court decision. This was something expected. The people in Gaza, they know there is some attack, there is some war somewhere, sometime, but they don't know when. The same people in Masafer Yatta, they know about the court decision. They know their home will be demolished, but when, they don't know. Both, they are fighting. I always say, if you would like really to feel how they feel, just close your eyes and live their case. I'm sure any one of us, they have kids at home, God save them all. But Allah, who died in Gaza Strip, she's 5 years old. Do we believe when she get sleep over the night or in the morning or playing on the ground, do we know really she will die? She's only 5 years old. And the old lady who demolished her home 3 times or 2 times, is it about the home? Is it about the place itself? Do we know how people, they save their money to build their dream home, their life home? This is really something we cannot live, we cannot even thought about. Even some of us, when they close their eyes to imagine what's happening, they will open their eyes immediately because they cannot even imagine what will happen and why and where and how. This is part of our life in Palestine. So Palestine, it's all Palestine. I mean, what's happening in Gaza, same as what's happening in West Bank, in East Jerusalem, in everywhere in Palestine. So this is really something people, they are living there for the last 74 years, and history repeating itself year over year, month over month, even day over day. I'm happy to have Sami, because Sami, he came in from the heart of the live from where they are. And within a moment, I thought I was there because I closed my eyes and I just lived the life there with my wife and my kids, because I have wife, I have kids, and I might be one of them, not away from my homeland. So it's really breaking, and it's really something that we have to stand for. Last but not least, do not act with action as a trending. So don't stop talking about Palestine, because some people, they are acting for trending. So Gaza war, Masafer Yatta, prisoners, East Jerusalem, and so on. So it's the whole case, and we have do some awareness to the people about the case. We are seeing some changes, but still we are in the beginning of the way to improve the awareness of the people about a human being in Palestine. They deserve to live as we live, and they have dreams as we have. It's really, I'll stop here because I don't want to take much time, because it was only 2-3 minutes. So this is really something we have to keep in mind. Do not stop talking about Palestine, and do not use only a trending. Keep in touch with Palestine and do some awareness around you about what's happening in Palestine. Thank you, Rawa. Back to you.
Thank you so much. I loved everything you said, and Allah yarhamhum. May God have mercy on them. And hopefully things get better. And yes, speaking is so important, and that's why I'm so thankful for PSNA. The next speaker I would like to introduce is Fathi Hassaniya.
Salam, Kiora.
Salam.
I just want to say thank you to John and PSNA for giving us an opportunity. I'm talking on behalf of Palestinian Youth Aotearoa today, which is a youth group that we formed a year and 3 months ago, so around May 2021. And we're a cultural group, but we also try get involved when and where required. We carry the Palestinian flag on a daily basis. If you know me, I'm always wearing some form of Palestinian shirt. So that happens. I just want to say great to learn about Masafer Yatta today. We've been following everything that's happening around the Israeli courts. As Maher just mentioned before, they want us to live in fear. You don't know when the court decision is going to come. You don't know when your home is going to be bombed. You don't know when you're going to be shot. And that's a reality. But that's a reality of it. But the real thing is, you go and talk to people in Palestine. You go and talk to people in Sheikh Jarrah. You talk to people in Gaza. They don't feel the fear. You know, you get a sense of pride. Yeah, we know we could get evacuated tomorrow, but we're here. We're gonna be holding our place in our land. We will not let it go easy, and that's what one thing that we got to be proud of. And another subject that I actually wanted to raise today was and it's just been and we're going to keep talking about them as we talk about land and we talk about, you know, what's happening with Gaza. Exactly. You look at what happened yesterday at Gaza, and then you look, what topic am I going to cover? I've come here today to prepare to cover Palestinian administrative detainees. So prisoners without a court or a hearing, prisoners without a crime. They just imprisoned because somebody feels like administrative detention. Because they don't like him, they put him in prison. You don't get charged. You don't get any rights. We're going to talk about Khalil Awada, who's been on hunger strike for 154 days. His hunger strike he was promised a deal that was cut for his release on the 21st of June. He got out, 21st of June came and he hasn't been released. And that way he's gone back on his hunger strike. You know, he's been banned from seeing his family. His sentence was extended, and he officially resumed his strike to his lawyer on the 2nd of July. And yesterday in Haifa, a whole group of Palestinian activists and supporters actually held events. There was multiple events happening around the globe to support Khalil Awada, and it's just not the trend, but it's good. Our collective action on everything, when we go in and do with the collective power, our voices will be heard. And thank you all for everything that you do. And sorry, Kia from me.
Thank you so much, Fathi. And we'll have Duncan Webb now, if he's here.
I am indeed here.
Thank you.
Good, everyone. And look, it's good to be here tonight. Look, I'm really just here to acknowledge what's going on and to voice my own support for for the Palestinian cause and for Masafer Yatta in particular. Look, I'll just say, I don't leap into these things quickly, as John would know, to his frustration sometimes. And I did take the time to go and actually look at not just the facts on the ground, so to speak, but the decision of the Supreme Court of Israel, because I'm a former lawyer. And look, it just does, and I'm just going to say a couple of short words. I know we're pressed for time. It does strike me that that decision sits entirely outside of the framework of international law. And what we seem to have is a position by the State of Israel which sees its domestic law and military law as extending over the land of Palestine in a way which cuts entirely against its international obligations as an occupying power, quite apart from the fact that the occupation itself is deeply problematic. But given that they are an occupying power, they have duties and responsibilities to protect and promote the interests of the Palestinian people. And the way in which this decision alone, just this one decision, which affects one area, ignores the interests of the Palestinian people, is indicative of the approach of the State of Israel to the Palestinian people more generally. And it's deeply, deeply concerning. I'm not going to revert to my old days of being a law professor and give you a lecture on it, but I do want you to know that in Parliament there are members of Parliament who share my view that there is a long and enduring wrong going on, and that we are and will continue to advocate for more concrete action on this. And we're very lucky that I'm lucky to be part of a party that's in government and able to speak to the Minister of Foreign Affairs and others, and that they, whilst we're not seeing tangible results immediately, they do listen. So I want to give you that reassurance that absolutely there are allies in the New Zealand Parliament for this cause and share the same concerns to the same degree that we see, that we've heard expressed by others here today. So kia ora, and thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Duncan. We were going to have Golriz Gahraman, a Green Party member of the Parliament, speak with us, but she gives her best wishes to the people of Masafer Yatta and Palestine, but she cannot attend. However, we will have John Minton next.
Kia ora koutou, ngā mihi nui kia koutou. Greetings everybody, and a huge greeting to Sami in Masafer Yatta. You guys are on the front line and you are facing enormous odds, impossible odds, and yet you have something that the Israelis will never have. You have that spirit of resistance that's run right through the Palestinian struggle, as you said, for 74 years, and that resistance will prevail. Here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, I think we're the farthest country away from Masafer Yatta. If you get a globe of the world, but this is what international solidarity is about. We here will be raising our voice as loud as we can here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and we'll be linking with groups around the world to support the people of Masafer Yatta, to support the people of Gaza in the appalling attacks which are going ahead now against the people there. So just following on from what Duncan said, we have a voice, but the biggest voice Aotearoa New Zealand has is the voice of our government. And it is extremely important that our government stands up for human rights around the world. Unfortunately, New Zealand has a history of calling out human rights abuses to a United States agenda. So if the enemies of the United States commit human rights abuses like Russia and China, and New Zealand is very strong in condemning them. But when there are human rights abuses committed against the people of Palestine or the people of West Papua, which is under Indonesian occupation, right on New Zealand's doorstep, New Zealand government will often look the other way. And it's the challenge for us as activists and organisers here to make sure the government doesn't do that, that they do speak out strongly for human rights wherever they occur or wherever abuses of human rights occur around the world. So be assured that you've got our, when you're facing those Israelis and the bulldozers, that it will feel very lonely, but there are millions of people around the world. In fact, the vast majority of the human beings living in the world are strongly supporting the Palestinian struggle. It's just that Palestine, the Israelis have a very powerful ally in the United States, at least in the government of the United States. But even within the US itself, there is building support for the Palestinian struggle. So I want to just take my hat off to you guys and say that we're here with you. The attack on Gaza is appalling, and all of the commentators that I've read have said this is because there's an election coming up at the end of the year in Israel, and Yair Lapid, the current Israeli Prime Minister, wants to do well in the elections. And so what better way than to attack the people of Palestine, attack Palestinians, which they're doing in Gaza, to make him look like the strong man standing up for Israelis, when in fact it's a cynical decision to spill Palestinian blood to improve his electoral chances at the end of the year. So thank you very much. We have a history of colonization here in this country, and we see the colonization which Israel is conducting in Palestine on a daily basis. And we have to link those struggles together, and we have to be honest and credible in doing that. So kia ora koutou, thank you Sami, and thank you Manal for your presentation and for the video. Kia ora koutou. There's a saying in Māori, Hilda will back me up on this, I'm sure, that says, kia kaha, kia toa, kia manua nui. Be strong, be brave, be steadfast. We know you will, and we're behind you. Kia ora koutou.
Thank you so much, John, and we appreciate the support. Next is Roger Fowler, organizer for Kia Ora Gaza. Can you please unmute yourself?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Assalamu alaikum and kia ora guys, everybody. I just want to echo what the previous speakers have said, and especially welcome to hear our speakers from Palestine on this call tonight. And to me, really just backing up what John said, we've got this imperative that we build up the awareness. There is good awareness, but we've got to build it up even broader, and international solidarity for the Palestinian struggles, and including the boycott campaigns. Kia ora Gaza was set up 12 years ago directly as a result of the caste-led attacks on Gaza and the attack on the Mavi Marmara to encourage participation in the solidarity convoys and international freedom flotillas to attempt to break the Israeli illegal naval blockade of Gaza. And we also have a website which gives voice to the Palestinian struggle, especially updating events on the besieged Gaza Strip. That's Kia ora Gaza website. So that's my message tonight, is that we've got to continue what we're doing. It's so important to build up the support internationally for the Palestinian struggle and resistance. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Roger. And I personally appreciate the Kia ora Gaza, and everybody else, of course, does. Next, Richard Wagstaff, the president of the New Zealand Council of Trade Unions. Richard?
Kia ora. And thank you for the invitation to speak here tonight and bring a simple message of solidarity to the people of Palestine and on the receiving end of injustice. I speak to you as the president of the New Zealand Council of Trade Unions, Te Kawe Ke Mahi. We believe deeply in human rights, and all of us, no matter who we are or where we're from, deserve the right to live in dignity and peace. On behalf of the working people of Aotearoa New Zealand, the New Zealand Council of Trade Unions continues to stand in solidarity with the people of Palestine. In the face of tyranny, we must uphold the principles that hold our democracy together: justice, equity, and liberation and access. We know that in times of conflict, it's the people on the front lines or people without privilege who suffer disproportionately. We can see that this continues to be true for the Palestinian people, who are being forced from their homes, who are exploited for their labour, and who suffer with a two-tier social system. This must change, and it must change now. I want to give a shout out to the work of the Palestinian General Federation of Trade Unions that continues, and the work it continues to do in the face of adversity, fighting for the working people of Palestine and who have been deprived themselves their rights as workers and as human beings. I want to also acknowledge the work done by the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, who remain committed to shining a spotlight on occupation of Palestine. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And so on that note, the New Zealand Council of Trade Unions stands with you in our shared fight to build a better world. Kia ora tātou.
Thanks so much, Richard. Next, Brian Turner, a Methodist Church minister.
Can you
please unmute yourself?
Is that better? Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Kia ora katoa. Greetings, people and communities, particularly of Masafer Yatta. And thank you, Manao and Sami in particular, for making it so real to us as we viewed that video. I'm a Christian activist, and on behalf of many fellow travellers and people of many different faiths, we certainly stand in solidarity with you and strongly oppose the Zionists of Israel who seek to displace you from your homes and your land. And it seems to me this is such a denial of the Judeo-Christian tradition of loving one's neighbour as taught by the Jewish prophets, including Jesus of Nazareth. So not only is what you're enduring a denial of faith, but it's also a denial of international law and United Nations resolutions. And above all, it is a moral outrage and a gross denial. Have you been hearing that okay?
Yes, Brian. Yep.
Yeah. So it's a moral outrage and a gross denial of the humanity we should respect in each other. I'm personally heartened that your cause is increasingly being taken up by churches and other faith communities. Here in Aotearoa New Zealand, the Catholic bishops are taking a stand. And in the USA, the Presbyterian Church has declared Israel an apartheid state, and sections of the Anglican and Methodist churches are taking a similar position. But regardless of our faith or non-faith positions, may you and Masafer Yatta, be assured of our commitment to not only stand in strong solidarity with you, but also to oppose with all our strength the outrage being perpetuated on you by the Zionist state of Israel. Al salam, al alaikum, grace and peace be with you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Wa alaikum assalam, Brian. Next is Jeffrey Wackham.
Salam alaikum and kia ora koutou katoa. I'm Jeffrey Wackham from the Palestine Human Rights Campaign. And as everybody else has so eloquently stated today, to thank Sami, Manal, and the video, which so eloquently illustrated the agony of your daily lives in Masafer Yatta. We're also cognizant of what's happening in Gaza, in East Jerusalem, and in fact, the agony of diasporan Palestinians who feel anguished about what's happening in their homeland and yet feel so limited in what they can also offer. And it also reflects our own sense of helplessness at times when we see what is happening and feel that we must do more. And as a white woman of settler ancestry, I'm so aware of our own colonial destructive history in Aotearoa New Zealand. And so it is with some pride, it is, and it's sort of heartening just to see the awareness within Māori communities and Indigenous communities, not only in Aotearoa, but also in Australia, joining with the Palestinian Indigenous communities, recognizing the settler colonial oppression, which is so ghastly in its Israeli expression and the manifestation of it's an apartheid law. So I was very heartened to hear Duncan Webb recognizing just the outrage of the Israeli legal system, which has imposed this terrible situation on the people of Masafer Yatta. So know that there were two people in our community and Palestine Human Rights Campaign, Leslie and Marion Bravery. They're in their 80s, and every day they document the atrocities that committed by Israel, and they have a worldwide membership following. Every day they receive it from the Palestinian Monitoring Center for Human Rights, and they distribute it, documenting the ghastly aspects of life, limb, liberty, and land, which Israeli aggressively and belligerently attacks. So we are with you, and we will do all that we can, privately, publicly, personally, to make sure that our voice for you is heard with our own world. Kia ora tātou katoa.
Kia ora.
Masalama. Kia ora. Thank you so much, Jeffrey. Julie Webb-Pullman, a human rights activist who has worked with Gaza Center for Human Rights to gather evidence of the Israeli war crimes. Julie?
Assalamu alaikum, kia ora koutou katoa. I would just like to pick up also on the human rights and international law aspects of the issue. We all know with Masafer Yatta that the transfer, the taking of people's private property is illegal under international law. We know that the military, the statement that it's for military purposes is just an excuse to take more land. We understand that. And we also are doing our very best to ensure that international law and human rights are upheld. but we face a huge battle, not only just us as individuals, but we can see that even when organisations such as the United Nations Human Rights Commission on Gaza, Maloon Koltari, one of their spokespeople, did an interview quite recently with Mondo Ice, in which they quite clearly said that the Israeli authorities has been illegal from the beginning. And Kothari said, I would go so far as to raise the question of why Israel is even a member of the United Nations, because the Israeli government does not respect its own obligations as a UN member state. They, in fact, consistently, either directly or through the United States, try to undermine UN mechanisms. Now, as a result of making that statement, they've been under huge attack. So when the UN commissions themselves come under the concerted attack, forced to apologise as that being anti-Semitic for criticising Israeli policy, we can see why we as activists and just the people of Masafer Yatta, how much more difficult it is for us on the ground to get any respect for international law and human rights. And just to pick up on that point, that I think that point that Kothari made is a really important point, because admission of Israel to the United Nations was conditional on Israeli acceptance and implementation of Resolutions 181, the partition plan, which required Arab agreement and which has never been forthcoming, and Resolution 194, which was refugees wishing to return to their homes. These resolutions have never been upheld by Israel. Israel is breaching its membership. Also, on other matters, in the same the conditions of their membership, the status of Jerusalem. Israel has had over 70 years to fulfill the conditions of its membership, and it hasn't done so. On the contrary, look what it's doing in Masafer Yatta. It has also violated 28 resolutions of the Security Council, which are legally binding on member nations under Article 25 of the UN Charter. And in 2013, 45 resolutions against Israel by the Human Rights Council. So, what we're seeing here is clear breaching, an absolute breach of the conditions of Israeli membership. So when we ask what we can do, when Duncan Webb, as a member of parliament in New Zealand, says these are matters of international law, this is exactly what we should be doing in New Zealand. And as our New Zealand government, we took the resolution to the UN Security Council in General Assembly in 2016 condemning the settlements. I think it's time we took our next resolution to the UN Security Council to have Israel thrown out of the United Nations, suspended from the United Nations until they meet the conditions of their membership, which they've had over 70 years to do and have not done. Now, I think that's a really concrete thing that we could do as a country, and which we have a history of doing. With regard to what's been going on in Gaza in the last couple of days, 0 rockets were fired at Gaza. Nothing. Gaza did nothing. Israel's unilateral decision to start a massacre is a clear act of aggression. And it is an aggression, is a crime, a war crime under the Rome Statute. Now, we saw how quickly the ICC leapt to take Russia to task over Ukraine, but where are they taking Israel to task over this latest blatant aggression in Gaza? So when we look at the rule of law, when we look at human rights, the UN, the ICC, what do we see? We don't see the rule of law. We see the rule of law for everybody except Palestine. And really, there are only two paths open to us: the resistance, or trying to hold them account under the UN and under the International Criminal Court. But as we can see, 70 years of the UN has led nowhere. The ICC rushed in to condemn Russia and has left Israel to do what it likes. So really, resistance, all we can do is keep supporting resistance. The people of Masafer Yatta are in resistance, and we must support them in every way we can. Not to say we don't pursue those other angles. People like Duncan Webb must keep working very hard inside, and we must give him all the support, and the others in there, all the support we can from the outside to get some resolution happening. I just think those are the only two paths left open to us. And thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Julie. I agree with everything you said. Lastly, if we could have Roger forward, please sing the "We Are All Palestinians" song.
Yeah, kia ora, thank you. I wrote this after enduring 2 days of an 8-day bombing campaign in Gaza just on 10 years ago. Exactly what's happening right now. It's raining fire from the sky. Nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Who will fall and who will survive? Well, that's the reason why. In our thousands, in our millions, we are all Palestinians. In our thousands, in our millions, we are all Palestinians. I hear the children scream at night, and the haunting sound of a mother's cry, as in her arms a baby dies. And I tell you why. In our thousands, in our millions, we are all Palestinians. In our thousands, in our millions, we are all Palestinians. I see a boy pick up a stone as the tanks blow up his home. Well, he's not standing there alone, and I tell you why. 'Cause in our thousands and in our millions, we are all Palestinians. In our thousands and in our millions, we are all Palestinians. From far away as we may be, over land and overseas, we stand in solidarity, and I'll tell you why. 'Cause in our thousands and in our millions, we are all Palestinians. In our thousands and in our millions, we are all Palestinians. Well, there's one thing that is clear to me. Till the day that Palestine is free, this world can never be at peace. So I tell you why. in our thousands, and in our millions. We are all Palestinians. In our thousands and in our millions. We are all Palestinians.
Kia ora.
Thank you.
Thank you. Roger.
So I can't hear you there, Roa. Is that just me?
No, it's all of us.
No.
Well, I believe that's mostly the end of the program. Is that right, Roa? Okay. We made it most of the way through with minimal issues there. So, well, firstly, I want to say a big thank you to Roa, who I believe attended a rally in person today and has then come to chair for us tonight. So thank you, Roa. And of course, a huge thank you to Sami and Manal, who have joined us to give us their perspective from the ground, and to everybody else who's given their time and energy tonight to share those messages with us. It's really powerful to see everybody come together and raise that voice of solidarity, I think. John, did you want to say anything before we go as PSNA chair?
No, I have nothing to say except that, to thank everybody, especially Sami and Manal for coming on the call. Sami, it's I mean, from so far away, it's very hard to, we'd all like to be there on the front line with you, I'm sure. And we're certainly there in spirit. And as I said before, we'll be raising our voices as loudly as we can and trying to get our government, which has the biggest voice in New Zealand, to speak out on our behalf. That's our big goal in the coming days and weeks. So kia ora. Yeah, thank you everybody for coming on the call. It's really good. I apologize